Today, we have a coaching call with Ben, who is in his 20s but has a lot of life experience. Welcome to Richer Soul, your journey to a more purposeful, intentional, amazing life. Where are you going to go and how are you going to get there? Let's figure that out together. At the core is the financial well-being to be able to do what you want, when you want, how you want. It's about personal freedom and abundance. At the core is knowing your purpose, and today we're going to talk with Ben and help him put the pieces together in his life as it relates to work, business, and real estate. In earlier episodes, I offered a free coaching call to people. That offer is now over. However, I will offer a 50% discount on an initial session to anyone who signs up between now and June 30th. Over the next few weeks, you'll be able to listen to some of the people who took advantage of that offer. Today, it's Ben. Let's meet him. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today, we have Ben on for a coaching call. Hello, Ben. Thanks for being on.
Hello, Rocky. How are you today?
Doing well. Thanks for joining us. So just let's get started. And if you'd like to share with the audience a little bit about where you're at currently.
Sure. Right now, I'm 26, just moved to South Texas, started a new job. What else is interesting about me? Married, no kids. Done a little bit of a whole lot of different career fields, still not 100% settled on what I want to do with my life. Hopefully we can figure some things out on this call. So,
absolutely. That's what we're here to do. So let's kind of take a step back. We always like to talk about money and growing up. So as you were growing up, what were money conversations like in your household?
Well, up until probably 12, there weren't a whole lot of money conversations. It wasn't something that my family did not talk about. It was just sort of something that my parents took care of, and didn't really do much involving me. We did not have an allowance, but any odd job money, things that my brothers and sisters and I made, we always did the three-way split of save some, give some away, and spend some.
Just out of curiosity, what percentage were you saving?
I think that we did spend 50%, save 25%, save or give away 25%, I think.
Okay.
Just because it was easy.
How does that compare with what you do now?
We usually try to do about a 10% tithe, and then saving has been kind of hit and miss. I'm a naturally frugal person, so I don't really know what the percentage is, but I tend to save quite a bit. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure what the percentage is.
That's fine.
So anyway, think about 12. The church that my family attended brought in the Dave Ramsey program, and my parents went through that and actually made all of us kids go through that with them, which was good. But what really cemented that in was my parents then decided they needed to be facilitators for that program. And at that time, I was doing audiovisual stuff for the church. So I got roped into, as a 12-year-old kid that knew how to run the sound system, I got roped into helping them facilitate that program. So I think by the time I was like 17, I'd actually been through the Dave Ramsey program like 12 times, which really sort of cements that mindset in your head. And
so did you get to hear the stories of the people who were going through the program?
Yes. I sat through all the it's not really one-on-one, but the class time, which was kind of gave you an interesting viewpoint of all the older people and some of the things they've been through that normally they wouldn't tell you about just, in normal conversation.
And so what were the most surprising things that you remember from those conversations?
Nobody has any money. In all seriousness, though, you, as a child or a kid, young teenager in church, you look up to all these people and you say, man, they're doing well. And it's not that they're not doing well, but as I said, I'm a naturally frugal person. I like to have cold, hard cash in my hand, and most people don't actually have any cold, hard cash in their hand.
And so that was an awesome experience because you learned a lot and you got to see kind of a peek behind the curtain of how people really live and what they have. And for those people who are in debt, I highly recommend Dave Ramsey's program. I've been through his master coaching program, and I think if you're in debt, he is by far the best person to help you put a plan in place to get out of debt and get you moving forward. And then once you're on your feet and rolling, then that's kind of where I come in and help. I went down there and I worked with them for a little bit, and that's what I kind of learned. Like, he does that well, but then there's nothing once you get beyond the first few baby steps to really support people. And that's kind of my niche, is to help you once you've built your foundation. How do we take the foundation and then build upon that? And so that was
I actually have a theory on that, because the only problem I had from that experience is, picture, you're familiar with the Dave Ramsey program, but picture as a late teens, early 20-year-old kid with zero debt and reasonable income. Basically, there's no guidance for that out of the Dave Ramsey program, because that's not what he's set up to do. So I kind of wrestled with that for a while, as far as how to approach things with that mindset, but without some extra guidance, and that's what's led me to some other sources. But tell me how this theory makes sense to you. Are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Yes.
Okay, so my theory is sort of a financial hierarchy of needs, and I've never heard anyone say this, but basically Dave Ramsey is the base level, and he teaches poor people how to not be poor in a mindset sort of way. They're not necessarily actually poor. But
Correct.
Once he doesn't offer any guidance once you're not poor anymore on how to be wealthy.
Correct.
And so you've kind of moved to that next category of needs. And there's nothing wrong, because you hear all these people that say, oh, Dave Ramsey does this or does that, and I don't agree with that because it's not the best investment advice or whatever. But if you look at it and you say, well, for the people he's teaching, it's the perfect advice.
It is. For the people he's teaching, it's the perfect advice. The other thing is, Dave's older like me. I think he's a little bit older than me. The advice he's giving made more sense historically than it does with today's market valuations. Because from 1983 to about 2000, the stock market just went nowhere but up. It was just, for the most part, besides a little blip, was just a straight line forward. And if you read the book Millionaire Next Door, the study set that they look at, and the people who grew wealth did it that same way too during that particular time period. So for the time period and for when he wrote his stuff and built his foundation, it made perfect sense. But yes, you're correct. Going forward, once you're out of debt and you've got yourself set up to be wealthy, the Dave Ramsey program itself doesn't really help you. He does have another program called Entree Leadership, which is about business. From there, you might learn more. But within the program itself, it doesn't. So then are you asking what else is out there for that next level?
Well, I mean, I've found a few different sources. Your podcast, of course. I know you interviewed Radical Personal Finance and Joshua Sheets. You spoke with them. He's a good source. Mostly, I've just been reading books. I think what it comes down to is it's really not all that complicated. Once you get a plan, it's mostly just the willpower to stick with it more than any incredibly fancy investing knowledge or anything.
You're correct in that. I don't think it doesn't need to be fancy. Plain and basic vanilla works. The problem is nobody likes vanilla. Everybody wants fancy stuff. And so it's the mindset that creates that issue and causes the problem. That's what we have to learn to get over. And there's a ton of people out there marketing to you a million fancy plans. There's not that many people out there marketing plain vanilla because it doesn't need much marketing and there's no money in marketing vanilla. That kind of creates that issue.
Right.
You grew up, you learned a lot. Sounds like you have a good, solid foundation as a teenager. And then you go to college, and in looking through your things, I see no college debt. How did you do that?
Over a long period of time, actually. I almost have 2 associate's degrees, but that took me about 5 years to do those 2 degrees. I started out and used a lot of the federal grant money, did the FAFSA program, and that paid for almost the first full degree. I think I ended up paying for about 2 or 3 classes of that by myself out of pocket. I stayed at home and lived with my parents, commuted back and forth to keep the expenses down. I had a job while I was in college. I think that's a big thing, at least keep money flowing in. And then I ended up taking a year off and working for a company that I had a very, very, very low salary from the company, but they actually paid for the second degree's worth of college. I think if you have a job that really opens up a lot of opportunities, there's a lot of companies that will pay for education one way or the other. There's a lot of grant money you can do. I never actually had much luck with scholarships. Everybody says that scholarship money sort of falls from the sky. All you have to do is catch it. But I'm not a strong writer, and so I think of all the scholarships I ever applied for, I only ever received one, and that was sort of because I backdoored it to a local organization that I was part of and convinced them to set up a scholarship that I think they only gave out 2 or 3 years because nobody ever applied for it.
And so that's 2 things. Knowing the back door into scholarships, just like everything in life, is one way. And the second thing is, so having the skill of being able to write and tell a story is also another way to kind of help to get the scholarship. So there is a whole art and science to doing that. The money is out there for those who want to attempt to go do that.
Yeah, and I knew a lot of people that were actually good at the writing portion and telling that story, and they did get quite a few scholarships. That just wasn't my strong suit. I always did they say do the time analysis, and if you get a $1,000 scholarship for 10 hours worth of work, you're making $100 an hour. Well, with my writing skills, it was more like a $1,000 scholarship that I didn't get for 25 hours worth of work. So it never came out at an hourly rate that made sense to me.
And that's okay. We have to learn what our skills are, and we have to decide to either improve them or outsource them. So you could, find one of those other kids and offer them $100 to write you a scholarship, and hopefully you get the $1,000 scholarship with their telling of your story.
Yeah.
Although that needs capital up front. So having cold hard cash is always good. So you got through college and then you were involved in some sort of a business venture. Can you share a little bit about that?
That actually started in high school, I began working for a local business that the fellow that owned it actually went to church with me, and he asked me to come work for him and do some odd job stuff. I did that for several years through the first college experience I had, and when I graduated from that, he said, "Why don't you go to college and become licensed in this field, then maybe buy me out at a later date." So I went back to college and got a state license for that and worked with him for a few years. And then his expectations of what he wanted changed. With that, my expectations of financial compensation changed, and he didn't agree with that. So we parted ways. I ended up being there about 10 years. Learned a whole lot about running small business. Learned a lot about working with people. But like I said, it kind of came apart there at the end. So looking for some other way to guide my talents now.
The important thing is when you're involved in something, the good thing about working for a small business is you get to learn a ton of skills on someone else's dime. So while you may not have made as much as you wanted and the opportunity didn't turn out the way you expected, you still were able to build a set of skills within that.
Right. And it wasn't even that we had agreed on there was an apartment involved, so living expenses were paid and salaries, and I was provided a car. So it wasn't that it was terribly bad for what we'd agreed on. It was just when the situation changed, suddenly he wanted a lot more, basically a lot more of my time. I think you have to recognize when a good thing is no longer a good thing and be willing to, I know it was hard for me to accept that, kind of that, well, I've committed to this and I've put a lot of time into it, and you have to be willing to accept that things change and sometimes what was a good thing is no longer a good thing and move on with life.
That takes wisdom and courage. And for someone at your age to do that, that's pretty impressive.
Well, it took like 6 months for me to get that wisdom and courage.
And that's okay. It happened, and you made your next move. Yep. So what's going on currently?
Currently, in the short term, I've taken a job that I work a 7-on, 7-off schedule, so that gives me some free time, but this particular job is using the skills that I originally went to school for as an aircraft mechanic. That is giving me some experience and something to be a little bit more marketable with that skill set, just because most of the jobs in that field want you to have at least a couple years of experience before you can get the really good jobs. That's kind of one facet of what I'm doing right now. I've also got an opportunity to work with a family member, an uncle of mine, starting a small business that it's starting a new branch of a business he's already doing. Hopefully we can get that up and running and get that to a place where maybe I can work there full time and make a decent business out of that.
So knowing what you know from the last time you were working with someone in a business and expectations changed, what have you done differently this time to be clear on expectations between you and your uncle?
I think that one of the things I learned is just to kind of hold out for what it is that you really want. And this is more of a financial thing, but don't take a lesser salary just to necessarily be part of something. If a business can't pay you what you're worth now, seems unlikely that it will be able to pay you what you're worth later. So that's probably one part of it. Another part is to kind of lock in the position a little bit more. In the first business that I was part of, I never did buy into the actual business. And I understand his reasoning behind that, but I think that if you're going to devote the time and energy to a small business, that just to getting one started, that it's better to have some sort of a tie-in where you're not just an employee, because as an employee, you really have no security in that position.
Correct. So what conversations have you had with your uncle to be clear on this in this opportunity?
We've discussed basically just buying into some ownership in this business, and I have not actually had a conversation with him about how the last business went down, and probably need to have that conversation. Like I said, I think just buying some ownership into the company. We've got a house that we're in the process of selling, should close on soon, which is going to give me a chunk of cash, part of which is going to go into long-term savings, and part of which I think is going to go into buying some stock ownership into this company.
And so you'll be a partial owner in the company. Do you have clarity on what profits look like and how you will partake in profits?
As of now, we've just discussed salary. As far as business profits and dispensation, probably won't pull any of that out for now, just because I know he doesn't pull any profit out of the other business he's running. He has other sources of income that pay his living costs. So he has 100%, I forget what it's called, but where you put all the money back into the company to continue growing.
Reinvest it.
Yeah, reinvestment. So that's probably what we'll do, and as this business gets off the ground, and my salary will be high enough that that's mostly what I'm concerned with at this point.
Are you buying into an existing business, or are you creating a new business for this venture?
We're creating a new business.
Okay. That's fine. When you get into business expenses and taxes and the way that small businesses run, and when it comes to, you can end up with a taxable gain at the end of the year and not have any money. You may get $10,000 in profit handed to you on a K-1, but you may not get $10,000.
Right.
I just say be clear going in what the expectations are, how distributions will take place, and people who own small businesses love them because they bury all kinds of expenses into the business. So be clear on how all of that works. The best way to do those things is to have open and honest conversations and good legal documentation, including an exit plan. Because at some point, someone's going to exit this business.
Right.
Having all of that up front with clarity just keeps life a little bit simpler later down the road.
Right. That was part of the trouble I got into on the original business that I just left, was we had talked about a lot of things, but there was nothing as far as my job responsibilities that was written down. What ended up happening was he said, "This is what I hired you for." And I said, "Well, that's not what you told me when you hired me." But there wasn't really anything to fall back on and say, this is what we wrote down, because it was just a deal on a handshake. I think that's what bit me on the last thing.
I think even going in with good intentions, these things bite you, because someone says one thing and you hear another thing, and you say one thing and they hear another thing.
Right.
And it's not malice. It's just what everybody hears. And
right.
So having it all written down clear cut, it makes life much simpler. Since you've already been through this and had this experience, learn once, that's fine. We can always learn the first time. We make mistakes. That happens. Don't make the same mistake the second time.
Right.
So that's the advice I have for you for that. So let's start looking a little bit forward. So you're going through this current change, looking at your past expenses and everything. You know how to keep things in line. You've got good money principles. So at this point, it's to build up and start generating more wealth. And you've got some things in place. You have a wife. And one of the things that young couples talk about is kids. So have you guys talked about it? And what are your thoughts going forward? And the reason I ask is because kids take up a lot of time and money. And if that's a direction you're going, then it's something to be planned for.
Right. We have had conversations on that. I'm pretty ambivalent on the subject. I don't care one way or the other. My wife is very interested in having kids, so that's fine. We're just not sure on the timing as far as when we want to. Her family had sort of ingrained in her that you have to have kids as soon as you get married, which we've kind of worked past that. Now she's got some things she wants to do, some traveling and some experiences that maybe she wants to do before having kids. So we're, like I said, just not really sure on the timing at this point.
And that's fine. You don't need to be definitive, number one. And two, you can always change your mind. It's more having the conversation to say, when does this make sense? And just getting a little bit more clarity on it. And it's not to say you have to do it this way or that way. It's just to say, keep the conversation going and put it in, because it will take up a question. If she's the one who's going to stay home and watch the child, then that clearly affects the income picture on that side.
Right.
Or if you go to daycare, then now you have to make a lot more money. These are things that you just need to plan for and think through and realize the consequences. And at the end of the day, having a child is roughly a 22-year investment in the sense of 18 years through high school. And then your decision about how and who's going to pay for their college and what that all looks like.
Right. Well, I can pretty much guarantee I'm not paying for college.
That's fine.
I think if you're paying for your own college, that's a mistake on your part. But
and that's fine. The only thing is you're clear on that. When your child is growing up, be clear on that. And then help give them the skills so that they know how to write well and they know how to get backdoor scholarships and they know how to perform well on SAT scores, because that's a big driver along with grades. So helping give them the foundation so that they can do that.
I'll just do a little side note on that. I know that SAT scores are really good. I will tell you that I never even took the SAT. I was homeschooled. They gave us the option to take it. I said, heck no. So,
did you take any standardized tests or you took none?
I took 0.
Okay. Again, it depends on the college you go to and what the requirements are.
Right. Everything. I always went to smaller colleges, started out with community college and then went to a small university. I think that that's actually a good path to take, because at least in my case, it worked out that they let me in with basically no standardized testing, I had a homeschool high school transcript, but nothing really official. And then I got excellent grades. And once you have a year of college under your belt, nobody really cares what your high school transcript looks like. If you can say, for example, I had, like a 3.85 or 3.9 grade point average that first year. And after you have that really offsets the lack of high school information.
Absolutely. It's all about what have you done lately? And so
Right.
if you have the proof that you've done it, then you're able to go forward with that. So looking forward, one of the biggest things I would say is to have a life plan up front in a sense of purpose. Where are you going? What does your life look like? Have you thought about that? And do you have a written life plan?
I do not have a written life plan. I do have sort of a mental plan. I will say I spent between when I left the last job that I was at and when I started this one, I was unemployed for about 4.5 or 5 months. That gave me some excellent time. Went out and bought a bunch of books, did a lot of reading, kind of got things straightened out in my head. I have always said that I wanted to retire relatively young just because, I thought, well, that would be a good thing to do. But having 4 months of no work to do kind of changed my outlook on that. I'm not sure that I actually want to retire at this point because I'm a fairly active person. I don't do well if I don't have any day-to-day things to accomplish.
And that right there is, I think, something that people should realize. When we're all working, we all want to stop working. And when we're not working, we realize we want to work. Without something to do and without purpose and without something to stimulate you, life gets pretty boring. And I think you learned another excellent lesson at a very young age. The question then becomes, what do you enjoy doing? And have you thought of that? You've read some books. You've got a plan kind of in your head. Is that what I hear?
Yeah, sort of. I'm pretty mechanically inclined. I think that is a career that maybe I want to do, something working with my hands. Done a lot of home repair, home construction. I've done a lot of working on cars and trucks and airplanes and boats and things. This current job opportunity that I have with my uncle actually involves working directly with engines and doing engine overhaul work. So my sort of overarching plan is kind of vague, but try to create a business that allows me to do that work that I enjoy, possibly either in a part-time capacity with myself or growing a business to have other employees where I can work it until I'm maybe a little older and then move into more of a part-time capacity, maybe when I'm in my 50s and 60s, so that we have some time to go travel and do things like that. My wife really enjoys traveling, and that's a goal for us. I know that's kind of vague.
No, and that's fine. So let's dig into this a little bit. How grueling is the maintenance work? In other words, when you're 45 years old, is it something that takes a toll on your body?
So we need to split the current part-time job that I have and the business opportunity that I have. The current part-time job that I have, yes, that's going to be a physically demanding job. This particular job, I have always said, was a job that I did not want, just because I knew the volatility of the employment market and the pay scale and the time you have to spend to get seniority. It's not a career path that I wanted to take for many reasons. But it was a convenient job that hopefully will allow me to get something else going. The business opportunity that I have should be much less physically demanding. It would be shop work, which is pretty easy as far as it comes to lifting, bending, crouching, all that heavy stuff that wears on your joints. So trying to move out of a heavy, physically demanding job.
Correct. Have you sat down and created a business plan, putting numbers to what this looks like going forward to see truly what the opportunity is?
Yes.
And how far out did you look?
I think 5 years.
Okay. Are you comfortable with the numbers, and does it provide for you what you want?
I think so. That's hard to tell for me because I've never made, quote, what I want. So I'm not sure. I have a feeling that once I get to a higher salary range, I'm going to, and this probably sounds a little weird, but I probably won't have much to do with, like, I have made around combined income between me and my wife about $50,000 a year the last few years. And I'm not sure what I would do with a whole lot more money than that other than save it. And that probably sounds a little self-aggrandizing, but in all honesty, I don't need more stuff. We would travel a little bit, but I don't see how I would be able to spend a ton of money every year.
Kids.
Yeah.
And you get lifestyle creep. I mean, that is what happens. You start to make more and you stop wanting to do the things that bother you. And so you start paying people, or you pay to not deal with that. And for most people, it's just amazing. You make $50,000, you spend $50,000. You make $75,000, you spend $75,000. You make $150,000, you spend $150,000. It's just what people do. It's amazing how spending keeps up with income. And it's a mindset. It sounds like you're at least aware of it. If you're comfortable with that and you can say, I'm not going to follow this path, that's fine. What you do with your excess cash flow is to create savings to build the large base of a cash flow business. Or we talked about Dave Ramsey. And Dave Ramsey does not say this. You know, he always talks about, oh, I buy real estate and I pay cash for it. What he does is he has his business, which creates excess cash flow, which he uses the excess cash flow from his business to buy real estate. And then his real estate becomes a cash flow machine that allows him then to travel. Because if you've got 10 rental properties, each one, you know, bringing in $1,000 a month, in 15 years, if they're all paid off, you've got your income right there. And you can go travel, and you can run your business, and you can do what you want.
Right. I have a little experience with rental income, and I think that rental housing is a great place to be at. I think I had a few problems with it. My main reason that I have not kept up and built that particular aspect is because we're not 100% settled as to where we want to live for extended period of time. And I think that makes it a lot harder to get into the rental market, just because I don't think you want to end up with a bunch of rental stuff spread across the country. You can go one of two routes. You can either know where you're going to stay pretty permanently and build a rental portfolio there, or you can always just kind of arbitrarily pick a spot. But I think you want to keep your rental property somewhat close to itself, if that makes sense. It doesn't necessarily need to be close to where you're at, but at least close enough that maybe you can have a property manager that deals with most of your day-to-day stuff on all your properties, as opposed to having stuff spread all over the place, at least for single-family residence stuff. Maybe if you get into some apartments or whatnot, there's enough margin there that you can go through different property managers. But does that make sense to you?
It does. And it also brings up an interesting question, because you just moved somewhere because of an opportunity, not necessarily because you wanted to be there. And now I'm hearing you may not want to be there long term.
Well, that's not entirely true. We actually moved here because this is our goal for moving was somewhere warm, closer to the ocean. Well, there's a whole lot of places that are warm and close to the ocean, and this one just happened to have a business opportunity tied to it. It's not necessarily a move that we did not want to make. We've only been here like 3 weeks, so my terminology hasn't adjusted.
That's fine. So let me ask you a question. Do you see yourself being there in 10 years?
I think we could quite easily be here in 10 years, yes.
Okay. And you'd be happy with that?
I think so.
All right. Because if you're starting a business and you're doing all this work and your business is there, then that's the type of thing that you have to think through and know.
Right.
Let's kind of look forward again. If you were financially independent, what would your life look like?
I think that my life would look pretty much like it does with a little bit more stuff.
There goes that lifestyle creep.
Yep. But,
so what kind of stuff?
My wife really, really wants to have a boat that we can travel on. And I know lots of money in a boat, right? They always say it's a hole in the water that you throw money into. So that might be something that we would look at doing. But that's, I mean, I don't have a whole lot of wants. I always tell people my trick in life is I get everything that I want, and it's pretty easy, all things considered. The hard part is just changing what you want to things you can get.
Yes, but you can get things that you want if you're willing to do the work to get them. The question is it willing? Are you willing to do the work for those things? So you're giving up your freedom, and that's a choice you have to make, but you have to be clear cut on it.
Right. But I contend that if it's something that you actually want, then doing the work is not work.
Correct.
For example, I have a brother who wants a different job, but he's not willing to actually go get a different job. Therefore, I believe that deep down, it's not really truly something he wants. What he wants is stability or not to have to move or something else. Or at least the want that he's not willing to do is not a strong enough want to overtake whatever the other want he has is.
And that could be some people get stuck. They have fear, and fear prevents us from doing what we want, or people put limitations on us and we get those limiting mindsets that prevent us from doing that. So he may be fearful of, what if I get a new job and I lose it? Or what if it's not truly what I want? So there could be 100 reasons behind that.
Right.
How close are you to the water?
We're about 50 miles right now.
So a distance. Okay, that's fine. So let's look at the short term. If we sat down in 3 years from now, what has to happen for you personally, professionally, and financially for you to be satisfied?
I think personally, we're really pretty set. My wife and I get along pretty well. We're in a place we like to be at, doing stuff we like to do, basically. Maybe a few minor adjustments of kind of what I think would just be your normal move to a new place things of, we need to meet some more people, build a little bit better base of friends down here. But like I said, we've only been here about 3 weeks, so I would expect that stuff to have to change. Professionally, like to build some more experience in the part-time thing that I'm doing now and make that a little bit stronger or a little bit more useful if I choose to go down that career path, if something falls apart for the business opportunity. But I've already, best as I can tell, I'm in a position where I could be promoted there probably within 6 months or so. So that's taking care of itself nicely. What was the other one, personally, professionally, and what was the last thing you asked about?
Financially.
Part professionally, part financially. Like to get this business going, increase my income a little bit, but I'm not sure financially if I could, probably double what I'm making now. Maybe not even quite that much. I think I would be pretty satisfied in 3 years. So, does that answer your question?
It does. How is your health insurance being covered now?
We self-pay for a health sharing ministry. I don't know if you're familiar with those or not.
Very familiar.
Okay.
And there's a limit on payout, correct?
The one we're involved in pays, I think the limit's $1 million per person per incident.
Okay, so it's pretty high. That's fine.
Yeah.
I know some of them have lower payouts, and I know both of my kids have been through 6-figure medical bills at some point in their life. So just, again, the thing that we want to do is to reduce all of our risks, prevent something that causes us to have failure that it becomes too hard to come back and overcome.
Right.
That, and the other reason I ask is because health insurance is a major expense today. If you're running your own business and you have to pay your own health care, and health care becomes $25,000 a year for a family of 4, then clearly you've got to add that to your income projections to make sure that you've got it down.
Right.
So even if you grow at the job that you're at, I think originally we talked about that job being a toll on your body.
Correct.
Okay. So it doesn't sound like that's a path that truly fits in with your bigger goals, or is it? It's a temporary solution, but it's not a...
It would only work, the company that I work for, probably I would not stay with them in that career field just because they are on the low end of the pay scale and, from what I can tell, the higher end of the stress level, which I think probably comes from just...
Okay, so it's pretty high. That's fine.
Yeah.
I know some of them have lower payouts, and I know both of my kids have been through 6-figure medical bills at some point in their life. So just, again, the thing that we want to do is to reduce all of our risks, prevent something that causes us to have failure that it becomes too hard to come back and overcome.
Right.
So, and that, and the other reason I ask is because health insurance is a major expense today. If you're running your own business and you have to pay your own health care, and health care becomes $25,000 a year for a family of 4, then clearly you've got to add that to your income projections to make sure that you've got it down.
Right.
So even if you grow at the job that you're at, I think originally we talked about that job being a toll on your body.
Correct.
Okay. So it doesn't sound like that's a path that truly fits in with your bigger goals, or is it? It's a temporary solution, but it's not a...
It would only work, the company that I work for, probably I would not stay with them in that career field just because they are on the low end of the pay scale and, from what I can tell, the higher end of the stress level, which I think probably comes from just their particular market share has a lot of turnover activity. So I don't know that I would stay with them, but there are opportunities in that field to move into more of a managerial position and do less of the physically demanding work.
Okay. Do they require a Bachelor of Science or a 4-year degree or no?
Not typically.
Okay. So you've looked at it and done. Then we have the business side. To live the life you want, you've got to figure out how to generate cash flow. So cash flow can come from a variety of ways. It can come from working at a job, which you're doing. It can come from building a business, which you're getting involved with, and it can come from real estate, which you've been involved with. One of the biggest regrets I have is not buying real estate when I was young, because real estate takes time to make money. You've told me you're happy with where you live. You said you'd be happy there for 10 years. You also said you're building a business there. You've got the skills to know how to fix and build and do stuff. What's preventing you from being more involved in real estate there, other than the fact that you've only been there 3 weeks?
More or less nothing. So my long-term plan for that is, like I said, I think earlier, we're in an apartment now we signed a 1-year lease for this apartment. My plan is towards the end of that year, or whenever, start 6 months from now, possibly start looking for a live-in flip home where I can buy it. We can move there, get it fixed up while we're living there, and then either flip it or keep it as a rental, one or the other, whatever makes sense. So, like you said, kind of the only thing holding me back at this point is time, basically.
That's the one limited resource that everyone has to deal with.
Right.
My suggestion would be to sit down, look at these 3 facets. So your current job, and write down a plan for it, in the sense that these are kind of the steps that I see occurring here. Sit down with real estate and say, here's what I'm thinking here. And just write down the pluses, the minuses, and the numbers. So if I buy a house, how much is the house going to cost? How much will it cost me to rehab it? What does that look like? Write it down. Figure that out. And then for the business, you do the same thing. And sit down. It doesn't sound like you have extravagant needs. If you can have a low 6-figure income and you're comfortable with that, definitely have everything set to be able to live the life you want. When you put it down, and you read a lot of books, so you've invested in yourself. I'm sure in all that reading, you probably read that when you write something down, there's just a mental mindset that goes along with it. Things start to move in that direction.
Yeah.
That's kind of the first step. For each of these 3 areas, write down your path. And then the next step is, what are all the risks involved? Where can something go wrong? What issues can I have? And how do I protect against those issues? Across at least all 3 of these, the one underlying thing is your physical ability to do things. I don't know how high risk the one job is as far as the ability or the possibility of getting hurt.
Probably pretty low. And I don't know true statistics on it, but just as a guess, I'm going to say that it's less dangerous than an auto mechanic's job.
Okay. It's not a high. That's fine. I wasn't sure what the
Right.
job was and how high risk it might be.
Basically just aircraft mechanic work. The risk is in long-term joint damage, just wear and tear on the body.
Okay. The thinking behind that is to have a good long-term disability policy.
Okay.
Because if something happens to your ability to earn money, all of these things fall apart.
Right.
and you're still alive and you have to deal with it. Whereas, and we'll get morbid here, but should you die, you don't have to deal with it. And at this point, your wife's young enough that she can live her life. You have no kids to worry about at this point. It's not to say you shouldn't buy life insurance. It's just that the long term of that at this point in your life is not high risk.
The original job that I had for the last 10 years was as a funeral director. I'm a licensed funeral director with the state of Indiana.
Okay.
A, you can't get too morbid on me. And B, I already own a lot of life insurance. Been down that road, not doing that.
And that's fine. So that's the life insurance.
Yeah, that's taken care of. But all I have as far as disability is there's a short-term disability policy, I think, that my employer gives me.
I would look seriously into a long-term disability policy.
Long-term.
Make sure there's a million rules and regulations in that area. You just want to make sure that as you have a good conversation with someone who sells that type of stuff, just dig into understanding what disabled means, because they all have their own particular rules for it. So does it mean that I'm disabled if I can't do the work that I'm doing? Does it mean I'm disabled if I can't get any job? So it's within your occupation versus any occupation. And if you go have a conversation with a pretty good person who's in that field, they should be able to fill you in. But that is one of the big risks that you face at a young age, involved in like all 2 or 3 of those things where they're a bit more physical. Now, worst comes to worst, you can go back to being a funeral director. We're all going to die, so it's a job that will not go away soon.
Right. I think that's always been sort of in the back of my head as sort of a fallback plan of, okay, if when I'm older I get bored with whatever I'm doing, that's an excellent job for an older person that doesn't need you can make good money doing it, don't get me wrong, but it also offers you the opportunity for a lot more flexibility if you're willing to work for a place that does lower volume business. You can have a very low time requirement for a given salary range on the lower end. So it's a good retirement job.
That's fine. Again, you still have to be healthy enough to do it. And that's where the long-term disability comes in.
Quick question on that disability. I'm making notes here. Do you want the insurance that is disabled for any job, or do you want the insurance that's just within your occupation?
That's a decision you've got to make. It's a decision you've got to make. In your case, you're not making a super high income in a very niche job that's hard to replace. For example, if you were a surgeon, then obviously you would want it in your particular niche, because if you can't do surgery and you have to go be a funeral director, that's a massive income shift.
Right.
In your case, it may not be as important. As you get older and as your life changes, it may be more so important. But being able to lock that in at a young age is always a good thing. So again, this is the thing. You're a smart guy. You can sit down, listen to what they're telling you, look at the different scenarios and say, what's my risk? What are my options? And what am I comfortable with?
Okay.
And what's the cost?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I suppose that also sort of offsets your ability to save money and self-insure. Because at some point, the goal is to be sort of self-insured for that with real estate.
Absolutely.
Not so much with any other job, but at least with real estate, you could basically do that if you have the ability to talk on a phone. You could run a real estate business.
Correct. It's also something your wife could be involved with, handling phone calls. It's not Once you have the business and once the homes are paid for, it is much less of an issue.
Right.
So in order to build the real estate business, then you need to sit down and say, what kind of capital do I need? So how much do I need to build up and put pen to paper? How much do I need to build up for the house and for multiple houses?
Right.
And then looking at the area that you're in is just learning the market. So there's probably some kind of local real estate groups in your area. It's a great way to get out and meet people. It gives you another opportunity to learn.
Right. Yeah, I was involved in the Real Estate Landlords Association up in our last area, and they always had something interesting going on. I think the associations like that are an excellent way to broaden your horizons.
One of the things, there's a million ways to make money in real estate. You're young, you've got flexibility. You have a wife who could possibly help, and that is to just get into the real estate management business, because that way you get 8 to 10%. You've got no capital invested, and you're kind of minting money every month off of other people's real estate. And the problem in that business is that everyone seems to gouge a lot with the fees, or they don't provide good service. So if you can build a business providing good service at a reasonable fee, and you can kind of fit that into your portfolio, if you've got 100 homes that you're responsible for at $1,000 a piece, even if you're getting 10% of that every month, or, that's $100 times 100 units, you've got a whole great business right there.
Yeah. Here's a little dilemma that I have kind of been wrestling with of how do you... So I have this opportunity with my uncle, which I think has a lot of opportunity to grow into an excellent business. I'm also knowledgeable about real estate. I think that real estate makes an excellent investment. I think real estate also makes an excellent business, those two being completely different things. I'm also quite knowledgeable and good at audiovisual production. So everybody that you read on the internet, of course, says start an internet-based business. So my question is this: do I focus on, in the near future, like the next 1 to 2 to 3 years, do I focus on trying to make one thing work? Do I try to focus on doing business with my uncle plus buying real estate? Do I do a business with my uncle, buy real estate, and do an online blog about the both of them? How much should I cross-contaminate what I'm trying to do in one area by spreading myself over 2 or 3 or 4 different areas?
The experts say do one thing and do it super well. There is a certain positive to that. At the same point, you've got certain skill sets that cross multiple things. And by doing multiple things, you reduce risk. In other words, if the business with your uncle fails and the real estate's humming along and you're blogging, well, 2 out of 3 of your cylinders are still hitting. If the rental real estate market goes down a little, you still got income coming in from your job. I think this is one of those things where you've got to sit down and lay them all out. Look at what is the big picture opportunity. If I go all in on this business, what is my maximum upside? And how does going all in on this business affect the overall balance of the life I want to lead? you've got to sit down and put them all on paper and then look at how those different opportunities intersect with other parts of your life. So if you did all of those things, you'd probably be running around like crazy.
Right.
So how would your wife feel about that?
Probably less than excited if I don't have time to spend with her.
Correct.
Like, that's our big thing. She's not as concerned if I'm going crazy when I'm doing work stuff, but when work stuff starts overflowing into not work stuff, that's when we get an issue. And I think that because I'm doing this, I'm currently split two ways. I feel like if I try to split a third way, that's going to be maybe more than I can balance right now.
And that is what you need to sit down and do, because the downside of your wife getting mad at you and leaving is that half your money plus just went away and the whole plan just fell apart.
Right.
So that's why if you sit down, you put it all on paper and you put the time to it as well. How much time do I need to put into this business? How much time does real estate take? Put it on paper and then look at the different ways to do it. So real estate is something that you can highly leverage time-wise, in the sense that if you have partners or if you have a good team around you, you do not need to spend a lot of time in real estate. So for my real estate deals, I have a team of people who do things for me. So if I need a house painted, I make a phone call. I just had 2 leaks in 2 different houses. All I did was call a plumber.
Right.
Now, I'm going to write a check for that, but it's not killing my time. And it's still allowing me to leverage the real estate business. It took me a long time to get to that place. So you need to sit down and say, where are my best opportunities that give me the best returns long term, that allow me to live the life I want? Because here's my life plan, and this is what I've said is most important to me. So when it's all written down and everything is clear, then you and your wife can sit at a table and start putting these puzzle pieces together and see how they fit. And the answer may come back and says, at the moment, I'm going to work at this job part-time, and I'm going to work on building this business with my uncle. In 18 months, actually, you even said it, in 6 months, we're going to buy a house, and we're going to renovate that house. That's something you do together. When you go into that house and you buy that house and you start renovating it, you say, we are either going to flip this or rent it. Know that up front, because when I flip a house, I buy a very different house. I do things very differently. When I rent a house, I buy a very different house and I do things very differently. Right. Know the purpose for what you're doing and say, okay, this is going to fit in at this time frame. This is how it fits in economically. This is how it fits in time-wise. This is the outcome. This is what we're expecting. And this is how long it's going to take me. And for everything you do, just double everything. It's going to take me a year to get this business with my uncle up and running. Okay, let's just say it's going to take 2 years, because that happens. I'm going to buy this house and it's going to do this, and I project it's going to cost this much. Well, throw 20% more on there. Add another 4 months to the schedule. So that what you're doing is you're removing all the risk. You're creating things that are much more stable, in the sense that if something goes wrong, you have the excess capacity to handle it. And you have the ability to do it. The biggest thing I'm saying right now, I think, is to live your life at 80% time-wise. So sit down and say, what's the 80% of my time that I need to focus on for work? Leave yourself that 20% margin to go. If business takes off one side, I have the margin that I can run and do 20% extra business and my wife is still not mad at me. Or I have the 20% margin that I can go do real estate for this period of time and my wife is not mad at me. Create that big margin around yourself. And then look at all your risks and say, what are all my risks? How can I remove the risks?
Okay. That makes sense to me.
And by doing that, by actually taking the time to sit down and think through it and putting the numbers together, then you know. I don't know your particular real estate market. You should sit down and say, what are average rents? How much does a house cost? Does it even make sense in this market to buy rental real estate? Because you might come back and go, you know what? This market does not support rental real estate. There are markets that don't support rental real estate.
Yeah, I think just in my looking for apartments, and we looked at houses to rent as well, it seems like it would, just as an off-the-cuff guess. But like you say, you'd have to run the numbers on it.
So how long would it take you to run numbers?
Probably a couple days.
Right. And so that's that's one of the things you want to do. As you sit down and you start putting everything to paper, you start running all these different numbers, the numbers for your business, the numbers for the part-time job, and you can even forecast out the part-time job. You told me in 6 months I can do X. So forecast out, what does that look like as part of the plan? And as you start to forecast out, you start to see going forward where everything is starting to fit in. And then you have the ability to say, oh, look at this. In a year and a half, things are really crazy. Okay, well, then let's shift the plan to not be crazy in a year and a half.
Right. Do you know, off the top of your head, of any books that talk about long-term forecasting like that would be good reads?
Honestly, I don't think anyone's talking about this kind of stuff. Everyone's reactive to the situation that happened. Nobody, there aren't a lot of, I don't know of that many people who are forward forecasting. All of the financial stuff is basically put this number in, put in your rate of return and how many years, and they spit out a number. I don't know that anyone is doing a ton with that. The only one that I know that comes close, on the last episode, we had Todd Tressiter from financialmentor.com. And I'm actually going through one of his programs, which is building your wealth plan. Building the wealth plan helps to answer some of these questions, but I don't know that it really gets into the time portion of it. It's an underlying part of it to say, focus your time where it belongs, but I don't know that anyone really sits down and does that.
Right. Because it's all good advice, but it's also hard to say, well, sit down and evaluate how much time you're going to spend doing real estate in 3 years. Well, how do you do that? I mean, you know what I mean?
Well, that's simple.
Yes, you can kind of do that, but it's also you have to have some experience. Well, how much time did I spend doing real estate in this particular instance? And I can say, well, if I double that instance, then I'm going to add a third more time. So it's
correct.
That's where I have trouble, is time balancing in the future.
I would guess if you just start guessing and have reasonable guesses and fudge the numbers a little bit to give yourself more room, you could probably come up with some pretty good ideas because you've done this before, right?
Right.
If you go in and you write it down and you come up with a plan and you put it on paper, then you belong to the landlord group. You go to the landlord group and go, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. I'm going to flip 3 properties. And according to me, it should take this much time. And what do you think? And they'll either go, yeah, that seems reasonable, or they'll laugh at you and go, you didn't even think about all of these 6 things.
Yeah.
So if you have a plan and you have something that you can share and go put in front of other people who are doing it, then it's concrete. You go to someone and say, hey, can you help me? I have a quick question for you. Here it is, concrete. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm looking at. This is what I think it's going to be. This is what I think I can buy houses for. This is what I think I can sell them for. This is what I think I can get rents for it. Does this look realistic? And at that point, you've got experts in different areas who can say yes or no. But if it's not written down and clear, then it's kind of a wishy-washy kind of conversation.
Yeah. Okay.
So the more clarity you have, the more it's written down, the better your chances of success.
Yeah, basically what I'm hearing you say is write a business plan for life, or wealth plan or life plan or whatever you want to call it, but
Correct.
Sit down and actually write it down and forecast it out. That's kind of been your overarching theme, it seems to me.
It is. In order to start writing that plan down, the first thing is to know, what are the things that I want in life? So let's go back to, actually, this is the easiest thing. In the funeral business, right?
Yep.
Go write your eulogy. Go write your eulogy. And then go backwards from there.
Yeah.
How do you want to be known?
Yeah, the only problem with that is I'm pretty sure my ideal eulogy would not reference my business necessarily. So.
And that's okay. Your eulogy may say he did this. So the question is, what do I need to do that?
Right.
At the end of the day, the question then comes back, how much money do I need to live this eulogy?
Right.
Now, how can I get this kind of money? Well, I have this business. This business can do this. If I do this much with real estate, I can do this. Then we're just putting the numbers behind the eulogy, and then you're looking at all the different options you have. How many of them give you the time as well as the money? Because if you spend all your time in that business, then you're not writing your eulogy. You're not living your eulogy. You're raising the money for the eulogy. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. Yep, I'm with you.
This is something that may take you a year to write.
Yeah, like I said, I think that my 4 months of not doing anything really gave me some time to start thinking along those lines. I know that I have spent a lot more time thinking about things like that in the last 4 or 5 months than prior to that.
You had the one gift that most people don't. Most of the people that I talk to when I coach are in the opposite situation. They don't have the time to think. They're so caught up in the moment, they don't have the ability to just sit down and breathe and think through those types of things.
Yeah.
You've had that time. So you've already got 4 months. So maybe it only takes you now a much shorter amount of time because in your mind, you've got all the little things already there is what I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
As you start to put them on paper and as you start to plot them out, you will start to see where things collide and you will start to see where things don't. Right now, one of the biggest issues I see is you're 50 miles from the ocean. If you were a mile from the ocean, it'd be easier to have a boat.
Right.
That's the kind of stuff that you need to think out. And if you had a boat and your wife wanted to run a business of taking people out on boat rides, it kind of helps financially. It helps to pay for the boat. Your boat now goes from an expense to an income producing asset that can possibly cash flow. Even if she's not the one driving the boat, you put someone on the boat to drive the boat. She just collects the money and waves as they go off.
Right.
That's what I mean. Once we start putting all these things down and we start piecing them together, we see where a piece is no longer fitting. or where that piece causes an issue.
Interesting.
You have to look at it money-wise, time-wise, and where things conflict.
Yep. I can tell I'm going to have to sit down and do a lot of introspection.
You are. You are lucky because you're at the beginning of the time curve. You've got your whole life ahead of you. It's much better than sitting down and having this conversation where you're 50 and you're like, how did I end up here?
Yeah.
This wasn't what I planned. I'll ask you a bit of advice. You were in the funeral business. What did you see? Or actually, I guess by that time you couldn't really talk to the people, could you?
Well, yeah. My advice is probably actually the same advice you would give of if you want to do something, get up out of your chair and go do it. I mean, that's where most people seem to have regrets is if you've always wanted to do something and never did it, well, that's nobody's fault but your own, because you can do pretty much anything you set your mind to. That would be where I see most people that had regrets that were, and I suppose that really covers about anything, because even family problems, for the most part, if you have problems with somebody in your family, well, get up and go over there and actually talk to them.
The hardest part for most people is getting started.
Yeah.
That is the most difficult thing, getting started. Once you start, everything becomes easy. Getting started is the most difficult part.
Yep. I have experienced that a little bit. Like I said, I spent that time not doing anything, and I kept getting people that say, well, why don't you go over here and just get a job at this factory doing this, or get a job doing that? And I would always say, but that's not what I want to do. If I do that, I'm going to become distracted from what I'm actually trying to do, and that would keep me from getting that start. And so I think that understanding what it is that you really want and then not letting yourself get distracted from that is very key to that getting started.
Correct. It's just clarity. And that's what we've been talking around this whole time, is you having the clarity of your purpose and the direction you're going. It's all mapped out so you see how it all fits together and you put the time and the numbers behind it.
Right.
So as far as putting together kind of the bigger picture life plan, Michael Hyatt's book, Living Forward, will help you with that. It will give you kind of a framework to sit down and write the life plan. And sometimes part of writing a life plan is doing what you just said, which is saying no to a lot of things. And it's good to have a list of no's.
I'm good at saying no.
Then you've got half the battle right there. Once you know the target and you sit down and you figure out your target for your life, it's going to be so easy for you to just go hit it.
Yeah.
Because you have the skill sets, you have the tools, you have the education, you have the experience. At this point, it's literally define your target. There are a ton of programs that can help you with that. And one-on-one coaching can help you with that, where, you've got somebody every week sitting with you going, okay, what have you done towards your plan? And then just kind of throwing darts at that on a constant basis, saying, you said this and this and that, but those two conflict.
Right. Somebody to give you that guilty feeling.
It's not a guilty feeling. It's just that you've said humans are irrational. I want to do this and I want to do that. And I had that with someone who called me up. She was a young mother and she's like, I want to go to medical school. I'm thinking of being a physician. I'm like, okay, but you have young kids. I thought you told me you wanted to be with your kids. Well, maybe I can go to medical school part-time. I said, I don't know. You should go find out. Because that's conflict time-wise. Some people just, that thought doesn't even cross their mind that if I do something over here, it's going to cause an issue over there. So it's just kind of human nature. You seem smart enough to go and see that yourself.
I think that comes back to that, what I was saying earlier about people do what they want to do the most. And so if you find that you're not doing what it is you think you want to do the most, then you need to look at what you are doing and figure out why do you want to do that more. Like the young woman you're talking about, she wants to be a doctor, but what she's actually doing is spending time with her kid, which is, as far as I'm concerned, a much better use of your time. But so what she really wants is to be with her kids, because that's what she's actually spending her time doing. I think a lot of people have trouble. They have these big, I don't know if dreams is the right term, because dreams are usually a better thing. They have these things that get them sidetracked of, I want to do this. Well, do you really want to, or do you just think it would be interesting? Because I have a lot of things that I think would be interesting to do that I'm not willing to devote any time to doing.
So you have within yourself a unique skill set that allows you to do that most people don't.
Yeah.
And so it's a gift. Be thankful.
I was listening to something, I think. Could have possibly been one of your podcasts. And they were talking about how everybody thinks that their kind of mental skill set is normal because they don't ever, you can't operate with anybody else's mental skill set. And that made me kind of think a little bit about how it's hard for me to think out of other people's situation just because some things seem so obvious to me. And I know that they're not maybe obvious to everybody else.
They aren't. I think there's a game that you play, I think it's called Boggle, where you throw these letters down, or there's these letters on a board and you come up with as many words as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because we're all sitting there and different people in our family will have a different number of words. Even the person who has the most words doesn't have all the words that somebody else had. And it just gets me thinking, we all see things from our own frame and lens. The reality is that when we do that, we're missing things. And that's why if you've got the plan written down and you just keep going around and showing it to people, you're going to start to get people who can help you correct your framing better and better, because they'll show you the different parts and then the whole picture kind of flies together.
Right.
There are programs that kind of help you put strategy together, life plans, and then there's always one-on-one coaching where somebody sits with you and knows you intimately and pushes you through it.
Definitely. I think it's also good just to, even beyond coaching, just cultivate friends that will kind of tell you how it is, really, and not just nod in agreement. I have a couple people that I always go to bounce ideas off of, and sometimes they say, "You're nuts," and that's a good thing.
Those are mentors, and absolutely having a good set of mentors. And some people even talk of literally having your own board of directors, which is literally a set of 6 or 8 people that are your board, so that when you have something you want to do, so let's say a year from now, a business opportunity comes up. You have that board of mentors that you go to them and say, "Hey, this business opportunity came up. What should I do?" And they're together look at you and go, "You told us you wanted this, that, and the other thing. That doesn't fit." Because the shiny object syndrome comes up all the time.
Yeah.
Or they tell you that does fit and you should go do that. So building that group, it sounds like you already have some of that group built, continuing to build that group. You're way ahead of the curve at 26. You are.
Well, I try to be. I've had a lot of people give me guidance over the years, so
and you've
hopefully.
Listened.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Nobody listens. And then you took action. So you got guidance, you listened, you took action. Most people don't do that.
The fellow that I worked for at the funeral home for all those years, even though things fell apart, that was probably one of the best learning experiences that I could have had. Like I say, because I started so young, and he was good with business and knew what he was doing and good with people and things. So learned a lot there.
That's awesome. Do you have any questions for me?
I think I got them all answered as we went along. Got a couple people to look into here. So hopefully I'll be able to take that and do some more learning and read some more stuff. So read more books. That's what I say.
Absolutely. And we didn't really talk about that very much, but investing in yourself, as you put together your plan and your financial plan, that may be a portion of it, is to create an investment budget for yourself, which says, I'm going to invest in myself. Here's a budget for books and courses and going to events. I'm going to spend X amount per year on this. If you have a business, it becomes a business expense.
That does bring up a question that I would like to ask you, because I know you have sort of different outlooks on the college experience. Do you think, as someone who I don't feel like the corporate lifestyle is for me, or probably ever will be for me, I've also been kicking around the idea of slowly working towards finishing, well, I need to finish the one degree that I've got. I'm like 2 classes away from it for a second associate's degree. Is it worth pursuing a bachelor's or any higher degree than that?
Unless you are going to work in corporate, I'm not sure what the benefit is. If you look at the schooling you've been through and the classes that you took, how helpful do you think they've been in your running businesses?
Probably the majority of, well, that's hard to answer because I've been through 2 highly technical programs that taught very, very applicable skills to the technical side of it. As far as business management sort of stuff, both were pretty useless.
So if you were to go for a degree, what degree would you be thinking about?
I don't know, which kind of tells me that I don't need it, but.
So again, you sit down and say, what's my outcome? What do I want to learn from this? And then say, what's the best way to accomplish that? If you're going to be in business, honestly, I think you're better off going out and buying courses about running a business. So you mentioned starting a blog and running an internet business. You'd be better off going and buying a course for $2,000 about how to do that from the expert in that field, and do that versus go to college.
Right.
Because it gives you the actionable steps you need to take in that highly specific niche. So unless you have a purpose for the college, it doesn't sound like it fits in the plan. Now, if you can make it fit, then great.
I think at this point, with all of the either free or basically incredibly cheap, I mean, your example of a $2,000 course for a blog, to get an equivalent amount of information from a college experience 20 years ago, you would have had to have a degree, which would have cost I mean, $2,000 for that amount of information. Information today is so cheap that the only reason to really have a college degree of your just 4-year bachelor's degree in basket weaving or business management or whatever, the generic degrees, is simply to be able to say, I have a degree. Like, I don't think that you learn anything you can't learn anywhere else. I guess in my situation, I kind of think that being able to say I have a 4-year degree is not a particularly useful thing for me.
So there you've made a decision.
So, yeah, I guess so.
As long as you don't have regrets to that. And I think, 20 years ago, people had regrets to that. 10 years ago, people had regrets to that. I think going forward, I don't know that the concept of college is dramatically changing.
Yeah.
So I don't know going forward that people are going to have those regrets.
Yeah.
Other questions?
I don't think so. I think that's good.
Okay. So at this point, I think you've got to sit down, put pen to paper of all the things you want to accomplish, see how all your puzzle pieces fit together, and then start showing them. You already have a group of mentors that you know of. Once you've got pen to paper, you can go show it to them. And Michael Hyatt's his book actually starts with the eulogy. The good thing about that is that as you show it to people who know you, they can look at that and go, you're living that life or you're not living that life. And so they can kind of also give you that feedback as well. Are you walking the talk of what you say you want to do?
Yeah. Yeah, I've got that written down. I will be on that as soon as we're done with this call.
Excellent. Anything else you want to chat about before we close out?
I don't think so. I think, like I said, I think I've got a lot to chew on from this. So
that's the one thing. This thing is a process. It takes time. This isn't something you're going to do overnight. For people who are just starting out, this might be a year-long process of sitting down and getting it to paper and figuring it out and testing it and making sure that it's truly what you want.
Yeah, I know for myself, part of what I have trouble with is, as I've been going through that process, I feel like I'm not accomplishing anything. And intellectually, I know that you have to get your head straight before you can get your actions straight. But it's still such a long-term thing, and nobody really teaches you, in school anyway, nobody really focuses on long-term anything.
Well, no, and what most people focus on is, let me tell you what to do. Go do this. That's not what you need. You don't want people telling you what to do. You want people asking you, what do you want to do? And then helping you put together the plan to do it. Yeah.
I've been reading an interesting book, Moonwalking with Einstein. Have you ever read that?
I have not.
It's about a fellow that got involved with the Worldwide Memory Championship and some of the other memory people that can remember stuff incredibly fast, and all the training that they go through. But he talks about how in ancient times, before we had published books, when everybody hand transcribed manuscripts and things, how you might spend years reading and memorizing a book just because you only had 5 or 6 books. And how once we became, I forget what term he uses, but when we had the mass marketing and publishing of books, we moved from a quality mindset to a quantity mindset, and how today we just basically read, the few people that do read books as fast as they can, just because there's so many out there, and nobody really says to really internalize a bit of information, you have to read a book 3 or 4 or 5 times, because you'll get something different every single time you read it. And I thought that was really interesting. I'd never heard anybody really say that before.
So what you should do as you go through life is start to create your bookshelf of the books that you think are most important and whittle that list down and then cycle through it. So you might read a book today, say, this is going to be on my bookshelf. And 2 years from now, you come back, you pick up that book because you will have changed in those 2 years. This life plan that you put out is not written in stone. It will change, you will change, life will change. Every time, if you keep revisiting that, you will see it in a different light. There's nothing wrong with updating your plan every year or every couple of years and changing your focus.
Yeah.
But having a good library is an important thing.
Yeah, that's my mother is what one might call a book addict, and I think I got a little bit of that myself.
Nothing wrong with it. Books are incredibly cheap these days, and the level and quality of the information is unbelievable. You can get somebody's life expert stories for a very small amount of money.
Yep. Well, like I said, I think that answered all my questions, although I keep coming up with more, but
that's fine. You can always email me.
Definitely appreciate your time.
I appreciate your being here and your willingness to share your story with everyone else.
Not a problem.
Thanks for that. Have a good day.
You too.
For Ben, this coaching session is just one step along a journey. Having someone to walk next to you as you go through all the steps and guide you, making sure you are going where you want to go, how you want, and providing resources makes the journey much less scary. I'd love to hear from you about future topics you would like me to cover. Please email me. It's rocky@richersoul.com. Thanks for listening.